Thou hast bestowed upon us. We thank you, Lord, that you have brought us safely through the Thanksgiving season. You suffered no serious harm or danger to come upon us. You enable us, our Father, to assemble at this appointed place one more time. And Lord, we ask if it is thy will that whatever is done and said here tonight would be done and said to the glory of thy name. And we ask you, Lord, to bless the decision makers, bless this city, bless our Father, this nation. All these blessings we ask in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Good evening, Chief.
Allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We want to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Quick outline of our guidelines for our City Council meetings. Meetings are public forums in which many opinions are expressed and the business of the city must be conducted. As such, disciplined, honorable, and professional decorum is paramount, and courteous and respectful communication is expected. During public hearings, all questions and statements from the public shall be directed to the chair. And if you wish to speak, raise your hand and I will certainly recognize you. Please approach the podium and state your name and address. In order to allow an opportunity for everyone who wishes to address council, speakers should limit their comments to the subject being discussed. Each speaker will be given 5 minutes to address an issue. It may only address an issue once unless questions from council are posed to the speaker. With that, I'd like to go down to additions and deletions to the agenda, and I will recognize our senior council member this time because our Mayor Pro Tem is sick tonight. So, Ms. Councilwoman Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of our Mayor Pro Tem Gail Diggs, who's recovering from pneumonia, there are no additions or deletions to tonight's agenda. Is that a motion that we need to adopt it as presented to council?
So that's in the form of a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second? Councilman Waltz, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. The minutes were distributed to council for their review before the meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Waltz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. We have one item under presentations, and to introduce that, I will introduce our city manager, Mr. Stuart Biedenbaugh. Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department nominated 2 of our citizens for the 2018 South Carolina Parks and Recreation Association Champion of Our Community Award, and John McMahon and Steve Peterson were recognized for their contributions. We regret to report that Mr. Peterson recently has passed away, but we do have John McMahon and John Heffentrayer who've attended the conference November 14th in Greenville to accept this award at the state level, and we have a presentation that we would like to acknowledge their work at the local level. So I invite Jessica Campbell, our Parks and Recreation and Tourism Director, to come forward.
Good evening, Jessica.
Good evening. Thank you, Council. I have with us tonight Sam Radford. She's our recreation supervisor over the concert series, where John and Steve have dedicated over 44 years of service as our sound guys for that program. And Mr. Heffentrayer as recent as 10 years of service, so we wanted to be sure he was included in tonight's recognition. Just asked that they come up, and they have with them the actual plaque that was presented at the SCRPA Awards conference earlier this month. And just want to give them all a round of applause.
Thank you, Jessica.
John, thank you very much. It's something when you've done it for 10 years and you're a rookie. Well, let me just say is enjoying and participating in some of the concert series. What a professional job that was done. Mr. Peterson will certainly be missed, but certainly not forgotten because of the great work and dedication that he committed and gave to the city. And we really do appreciate it. It's a true task of love to deal with sound with fussy musicians. I know because I'm a fussy musician. But y'all guys did great, so thank you for your service to our city. All right, we're going to move down old business at this time. Number 1 under old business is approval of appointments and discussion of appointees to various city boards, commissions, and committees. Now I'll recognize Mr. Biedenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council does have 33 pending appointments for various boards and commissions, and we have 2 appointments for council consideration tonight. Councilwoman Price has recommended the reappointment of 2 individuals. Ms. Valise Cummings, reappointment to the Design Review Board for a term that would expire December 31st, 2020, and Carolyn McPherson, reappointment to the General Aviation Commission for a term that would expire September 1st, 2020. Also, the chair of the Energy and Environmental Committee, Elise Fox, has submitted an email with the Earth Day coming up. She's asked that some consideration for appointments be considered, as those board members do a lot of work getting that program together. So for council's consideration, you have Councilwoman Price's recommended reappointments of Valise Cummings to the Design Review Board and Carolyn McPherson to the General Aviation Commission.
All right, very good. Is there a motion to accept these appointments?
So moved.
We have a motion, second. Ms. Waltz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. At this time, we'll entertain names for nominations for our next called meeting. And I'll say my E&E committee member has resigned, so I will try to have a name to you before our next meeting so we can get on that. So, any other names to be considered at our next meeting?
I have 2 reappointments, one for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Karen Daly has agreed to continue her service, and for the Planning Commission, Jack Hunter, reappointed.
All right.
Who is here tonight? You want to wave at everybody?
I would renominate Brendan Doherty for Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, very good. Any other names for our next meeting to be considered? All right, thank you. Moving down old business number 2, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance accepting the FY 2017-18 audit. By title, an ordinance accepting the fiscal year 2017-2018 audited financial statements and authorizing variances to the fiscal year 2017-18 budget ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor, that we accept the financial audit for 2017-18.
Councilwoman Price, is there a second? Mr. Dewar, thank you. Comments from staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have second reading tonight of an ordinance to approve our fiscal year 2017-18 budget, or excuse me, audit that was performed by Malden and Jenkins. Mr. Miller Edwards, a principal with the firm, was here last meeting to discuss the audit at a work session, and then here for first reading, and no material weaknesses nor instances of non-compliance were found, so it was a clean opinion. So we have for second reading tonight approval of our fiscal year 2017-18 audit report.
Thank you, Mr. Biedenbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor on this item on second reading, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down old business to item number 3. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance for budget adjustment for Park and Recreation Development Grant. By title, an ordinance amending the budget of the City of Aiken for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018 and ending June 30 of 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Girardeau. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. We do have second reading of a budget amendment. We received a $20,000 grant from the State Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism for a shelter renovation, and the $5,000 match in funding is necessary, but what we need the budget ordinances for is to amend the budget with the grant amount, the grant award of note $20,000 of an increase in revenue and the corresponding expenditure of $20,000. And that is before council today is second reading of the ordinance to adjust the budget to reflect the grant award.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any comments from the audience? Comments or questions from council? Okay, all those on second reading, in favor of the second reading and public hearing for the ordinance for budget adjustment, please raise your hand. Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Moving down the agenda to new business, item number 1. Item number 1 is the first reading of an ordinance to rezone 11 lots on Waterloo Street from Limited Professional LP to General Business GB to Limited Business LB. By title, an ordinance amending the zoning of 11 properties located on Waterloo Street from Limited Professional LP to Limited Business LB. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Jarretto. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Walters. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. At their November 13th Planning Commission meeting, the Commission did consider a request to rezone 13 properties along Waterloo Street, which stretches from Richland Avenue to Hayne Avenue. This goes back in July. Council made a request to the Planning Commission to evaluate the zoning for Waterloo between Hayne and Richland. Due to concerns about density and the number of vacant properties, as well as the potential for reinvestment in the area. The Planning Commission had several, they received the referral at the July 10th work session, had discussions at their work session on August 14th. And then at their October 9th meeting, directed staff to notice the rezoning of the properties. And the properties were noticed 26 days ahead of time. I will say for the record, there was some, we were informed that the signage was removed early that afternoon, but of November 13th inadvertently, but after review with staff and the city attorney, it was felt that it did meet their posting requirements, and we regret that they were removed early. After reviewing and studying the Waterloo area, the Planning Commission, those in attendance with one commissioner absent, unanimously recommended 6-0 to recommend the approval of the application to rezone all of the property with one condition, that the two properties currently zoned general business, specifically 103 and 113 Waterloo Street, would continue to be rezoned general business, would continue to be zoned general business and not be rezoned to limited business. And we do have attached in the packet an email from one of the business owners who owns the structure at the property at 113 Waterloo Street, requesting that it stay general business. And also, in addition to the Planning Commission packet that reflects the recommendation from the Commission and the staff memorandum, we did attach also a comment from a resident that we received, Rachel Dontremont on Hayne Avenue, submitted something in writing November 20th, the day the agenda was released. And we did have a number of meetings to discuss this matter, and as part of the, and as well as part of the overall idea to renovate Richland Avenue, or excuse me, to consider Richland Avenue West. This was part of that discussion, but there were, I believe, in talking with the planning director, 11 meetings where this has been discussed. So before council tonight is first reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning of these 11 properties on Hayne, on Waterloo, from Hayne to Richland, from limited professional LP to limited business LB.
All right, thank you. And I just want to clarify, because I've asked this question. the signs that you mentioned were pulled up that afternoon, but how long had they been posted?
26 days.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that was, all right, very good. Thank you, Stuart. We're going to open up comments from the audience at this time. If you want to speak, please raise your hand, and I certainly would recognize you, so this would be the appropriate time. So, Rachel. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rachel D'Entremont, 1111 Hain Avenue. I submitted a letter to you, and I won't bore you to death by reading it because I don't read all that well. But I do want to point out some things, highlight them. I have been on Hain Avenue since 1980. My children are now adults. They were born living in this neighborhood. It's a wonderful neighborhood. A lot of the people that I've known my whole life, I've known from rezoning meetings because we've been doing this since 1980 and probably before then. Waterloo Street is ugly. Waterloo Street has been let go. It has not been maintained, but it's closed during the evenings, it's closed during the weekends, and it doesn't bother the neighborhood. It seems that we're almost rewarding people for letting the property deteriorate by making it a more sellable property that they can get some more money from, and at the expense of the neighborhood. I think that rezoning this will erode the adjacent residential rather than strengthen it. I think the property owners will have trouble enjoying their own properties because they will have, I don't know if you've worked near a restaurant or been near a store at the end of the day, but the employees come outside and they get a cigarette and they laugh and they carry on. So yeah, you close the businesses at 10, which is already too late for a residential neighborhood, but there's still noise even after they're closed. I think this will cause creep farther into the residential neighborhoods because when these neighbors are not enjoying their own homes anymore, they're going to rent them out. And historic homes do not do well as non-owner occupied homes. They just do not last. They will deteriorate, and then there goes our historic district. Other retail sales and service, as you saw in the letter, is anything that is not listed specifically on the use chart. So when you say there's just a minor differences, that is not the case. I was part of creating this ordinance, and I worked in the planning department enforcing this ordinance for 14 years. Other retail sales and service is a catch-all for everything. Parking. There is so little parking already on that street. When Shell House has a funeral, they park in front of our homes. When there's a I'm sorry, something up on one of the side streets, they're parking all over the parkways. Parking requirements are minimums in the ordinance. It's not the maximum parking. They're already parking on the rights of way. One thing we don't have with limited professional is delivery trucks, but you can't have restaurants or retail without delivery trucks. So we're going to, instead of somebody taking their little Honda Fit over to Staples and getting supplies, excuse me, they're going to be bringing trucks into the neighborhood. Aiken advertises itself as historic downtown Aiken, and I see this as detrimental to the preservation of historic homes. I'm afraid we're going to dilute the downtown business by spreading retail and other services out from the downtown business. There are already multiple vacancies on Lawrence Street. Park Avenue is about half vacant, the commercial parts. So it's not healthy to keep extending the retail out from the core business district. We were told at the Planning Commission meeting that the reason for this is that Waterloo is not selling. And I would say that it's not the city's job to sell property. If they had maintained the property for professional use, it would not be vacant, it would be occupied. Study after study after study has said we need more residential downtown, more multifamily downtown. And we need to preserve our historic districts. Those are not being done with this proposal. I'm almost done. The downtown of many cities has deteriorated. You go up to places like Johnston and Edgefield, and there are these beautiful old homes next to a quick shop or next to some other business because they're no longer viable neighborhoods. Aiken isn't there yet. This could be the council that turns Aiken around and sends it the other way, makes the historic and residential districts even stronger than they are now. And it's a beautiful town. We can make it better, and we can bring more people downtown, which is what all these studies tell us we need to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm going to do this because Rachel had asked, and it's not in lieu of trying to just stop anyone from speaking your mind, but she had asked if I would. Those who are here in favor of what Rachel's words, would you mind raising your hands at this time? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, Rachel. All right. Any other comments from the audience? Yes, sir. Rocky, I'm sorry, I got. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm William Mangianti. This is my wife, Diane. We live at 1745 Highland Park Drive. We have for 29 years. That puts us within walking distance of the proposed change area. And we can see how this kind of a change could actually work for the improvement of the area, especially in concert with the redevelopment of the old county building on the other side of the street. We've read through the background materials from the previous meetings, so we have a pretty good understanding of how the pros and cons of this proposed change have already been discussed. I'm going to turn the podium over to Diane in a minute because she's got some recommendations to make of things that the city could do to kind of show a good faith effort in making this change positive and making it happen. I thought we had several questions to ask, but we've read through the background materials that were provided out front here, and you did a good job of putting those together. I guess the only question I have left is, have the property owners on Waterloo Street signed up to this change? Because it's being done a little bit backwards. Usually the property owner makes the petition for the zoning change. In this case, the city has done that, so it's a little bit different. So that's one question. And the other question is this entirely speculative at this point, or are there some at least preliminary plans in place on the parts of some of the property owners for what they want to do with their properties? Okay, so I don't know if you can answer those questions now.
Stuart, would you like to?
Yes, that is correct. This was a referral from the city to the Planning Commission. So if I don't believe that we've got necessarily does 100% of the property owners approve that? I don't have that answer.
So it is kind of speculative at this point?
Somewhat.
Okay. And as I said a few minutes ago, Diane got a few recommendations that she wanted to make.
Thank you.
Good evening, Diane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. First of all, I raised my hand in support of what Rachel D'Entremont said because we do live close by. We do value that historic nature, and I think there are ways that you might strengthen the use of this street as a buffer and a mixed use, which it already is. Whichever way you go with the zoning, that might improve and stabilize its function between the general business and the residential nature of this very special historic community. The three suggestions I'd just like to throw out there, both limited professional, as I understand it, and limited business designations call on the land use to be pedestrian-oriented. Therefore, I would suggest that the city improve the pedestrian friendliness of the street by extending the existing streetscaping, of Hain and the alley, which comes down Hain, but including sidewalks, pavers, plantings, and lighting fixtures so that it is a more pedestrian-friendly place, and maybe then the businesses would be more attractive for sale and reinvestment. The city has ample evidence of the long-term improvements that occur in areas where you have added these sorts of upgrades. 2, the city has already invested heavily on the other side of Richland Avenue from Waterloo in upgrades to private homes. Non-commercial properties on Waterloo should be evaluated for similar improvements, perhaps through the Aiken Corporation, as was accomplished on the corner of Greenville and Richland and up Morgan Street. Stabilizing the existing residences on Waterloo Street will help it retain its function as a transition to the surrounding residential area. And third, if appropriate, the city could establish a small public safety presence, which with improved lighting mentioned earlier, would provide additional deterrence to crime, something always welcome to both commercial and residential owners. Positioning officers here might also positively impact crime on West Richland Avenue. So to summarize, pedestrian-friendly streetscaping, upgrades to existing residential properties on Waterloo, and a small detachment perhaps of public safety would make Waterloo Street immediately more attractive for its current or possible future intended mixed use and as a buffer to the residential areas. The city's investment would be a concrete sign of its belief in the viability of our neighborhood as the sustainable, pedestrian, and family-free area we believe it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you. I appreciate it.
She's got a written copy of this. Can we submit that?
Yeah, if you can give it to Ms. Sarah, and she'll make sure it's submitted with the minutes. Thank you for your presentation. Okay. Rocky? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us speak today. My name is Rocky Napier. I own property at 143 Trafalgar Street, limited professional, and I've been there for 29 years. I'm disappointed in the way this entire process is going. Back during the summer, I received an invitation to attend a meeting over at Meade Hall. And I really didn't know what the meeting was about. It was like, there's some changes coming to your neighborhood. Would you like to be there? Come let us hear from you. I almost didn't go to the meeting because it was so vague, or at least it was in my mind. But I ended up going to the meeting anyway. And so when we arrived, I became even more disappointed in the way that the meeting was being conducted. The question that was presented to the group for the majority of that evening was, we're going to be making some changes to your neighborhood that's bounded by Greenville, Hain, and Richland Avenue. And what we want to know is, what level of commercialization are you willing to accept? Will you accept a mild amount, a moderate amount, or a heavy amount, basically? And we went through all these different layouts and all these different maps, and we marked this and we marked that. And then finally, after over half the meeting was over with, somebody said, what about the option of this area continuing to revert back to residential from limited professional? Well, you know, well, once that point was brought up, the opinion in the room, based on what I saw and heard, was pretty much unanimous. We want this part of the neighborhood to revert back to residential rather than to continue down the road to commercialization. Because once you go to one level of commercialization, the next step is going to be another level of commercialization until you're flat out retail. So I'm real disappointed in that. I hear about the signs being pulled up on the day of a hearing, and I'm like, Sounds like the cake's already in the oven. And now, tonight, I see this memo from Ryan Bland dated 26th November 2018. Map of residential and non-residential uses in the vicinity of Waterloo. On this map over here, if you look at it at first glance, you would think everything in the area is already commercialized. So why would anybody oppose the proposition of rezoning these pieces of property to limited to general business or limited business? My property on Trafalgar Street, it's limited professional. That's different than a whole other segment that's contained within the commercialization bracket. And that's not delineated on this map, and it needs to be. The second thing that's not delineated on this map is there are a number of limited professional properties on this map that are being used for residential purposes. They may be zoned limited professional, but they're being lived in by residents. They're not being used for commercial purposes. Property to the south of me is residential. It's not commercial. It's zoned limited professional, but a lady lives in it by herself. Property to the north of me, it's got a combined use. Someone's living in it. At the same time, they're running a business out of it. That's not shown on this map. So I don't know what the real story is when I take a glance at this map. And I don't think everybody in this room does either. And I think that needs to be fixed. About 10 years ago, I guess it was, maybe longer, this issue came up on Waterloo about rezoning a piece of property. We're going to take it from limited professional and put it in a beauty shop. And I was against that then. Our entire neighborhood was against that then. And I'm still against it tonight. There's no urgency for City Council to proceed down the path that it's proceeding at this particular point in time. No urgency whatsoever. And there's a lot of other changes that are going to be going on in the neighborhood, like over at the old county hospital property, that could have an impact on what would be best to do on Waterloo. Based on what you've told us tonight, you don't have an input from all the property owners on Waterloo. What you're doing here is highly speculative. It's not well thought out, and it's detrimental to the residents that are living in properties that are zoned limited professional, and it's detrimental to the residents that are living in properties that are zoned residential. And I urge you to stop this process and do this at a more appropriate time in the future in a manner that is better thought out than is currently being done tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Give it one more shot. Elaine Yaroche, 132 Trafalgar.
Elaine.
I back up to Waterloo. We do have a buffer with some of Shell House's crypts in it, which are fine. They don't talk.
How wide is that buffer, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't know. They bought that piece of property behind our property. Ours was all bricked in and everything. But the house next to, I was told by a city council member here, and the reason I got involved in this in the first place was that the city wants to expand the downtown business district, and we want to take from Waterloo down to Hain and Richland Avenue, and we want to turn it into general business, was initially what I was told, or at least that's the way I understood it. I was told that I didn't understand anything. But just some of the things I've said before that were brought up, and I don't know who the lady was up here one night. Gail, I guess it was. No, it wasn't Gail. Somebody mentioned that these people, these poor people that own this property couldn't sell their property, and it's been mentioned before. You know, you don't change zoning because somebody can't sell their property. If I can't sell my property someday, is somebody going to come along and help me out?
we do have plans, we do have a program in the city where we do sell down, tear down properties, and I think, as been mentioned, if somebody would have, if the city would have helped instead of changing the whole zoning, if they would have torn down something and made it more conducive for somebody to want to come along and build a house. I mean, the way it looked now, I wouldn't want to build a house, and not knowing what was going on there or going to go on, you know, I wouldn't want to buy property there myself. I just went to the dentist today, and I was told by my dentist that the people that he has had ask him about his property, which he almost had sold at one time, but owned half of the building on Waterloo, so it was a problem. The one woman apparently maybe didn't want to sell and kind of messed up the deal, but they were going to put residential next door and do something with that building. And he said also the one on, and I don't know that this to be true, I was just told this, that the building on Hain next to him, the little building that sold after the addition.
By Dr. Eubanks.
Was, yes. And he said that was bought professionally. Now, I don't know who bought it, so I can't say that for sure.
It was purchased by a company to continue it to be commercial, yes.
Commercial, or now when we're speaking commercial, are we speaking commercial? There's a difference between, we mentioned that when we came in, and I understand the difference and not stupid, but all these ones that are marked in green look to everybody as if they're just hardcore commercial use. Well, there's a difference between limited professional and limited business, or we wouldn't be going through that. And I think 11, on Waterloo, there's 11.
Right.
What is it, 13 that are, what's the number, 13 and 11?
There's 13 parcels, 11 being considered in this.
So 11 are already limited professional.
Right, two are general business.
We're making it look as if it's
Yeah,
all commercial.
I mean, I agree with you.
You know,
A lot of those are
confusing to us
because
that have
limited
been-
professional does obviously allow for residential as well. So
Well, both allow residential,
Yeah.
LB or LP. The two at the top on the left-hand side going north are GB. The rest of them are LP. Out of all of them, one is being lived in as a house, which
Right.
is Hugh Eford's
That's
house.
the new.
And then one is vacant, and that one's still considered residential. The property that was bought was a dentist office, and as I understand it, they plan to make it an office, whether it's dentist, I'm not 100% sure, but it will stay within the LP use. They didn't buy it with the idea that it'd be LB.
Well, another thing that just kind of concerns me is the parking, and I know if you're wanting most of the parking because everybody's concerned about the cars around the back and the sides of a building. That's going to affect, now if it comes down like we're saying, if the city decides that they want to take on my street and all those streets down there and do this, the house next to me is from here to that window, my bedroom. And there's not a thing I can do about it if a business goes in there and, you know, is open till 10 o'clock at night. You know, so it's going to change the quality of life for some people, and I think even it was mentioned in the last meeting that somebody does have that backing right up to their bedroom that's possibly in the historic district on the other side of Waterloo. So I just go along with what Rocky said, that, you know, I think we really need to, everybody's jumping on this because of the hospital. I was told, oh no, it has nothing to do with the hospital. It has everything to do with what they're doing with the hospital, to allow for more walking, to, you know, but it takes a lot of cups of coffee to sell to make up for what a dentist or a doctor brings in as far as a tax base. So that's about all I can say. I just think Richland Avenue needs a lot of help as it is. There's tons of property for rent and sale, like I mentioned before. There were 13 properties. We got the payday loans that I understand we can't do anything about at this time, but I mean, other cities do. We've got the ridiculous colors on these buildings. I mean, really, Richland Avenue looks like, and the quick shop on the corner looks like Tijuana. And that's the way we come out of our driveway. And I would just like to see things upgraded instead of degraded. And I really think you need to protect the historic district, and I agree with the things that Rachel said. So thank you very much.
Wayne, thank you. Any other comments to council? Yes, sir.
I'm Neil Myers, 1108 Valley Green Drive. Just one question. If you do what you're proposing here, what do you think is going to happen to Waterloo?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Myers.
I'll be glad to answer that.
Mr. Perry,
In my opinion, that's just my opinion, and being in real estate and being an appraiser and a sales agent, it may not have any effect whatsoever if we change it to LB. It may stay the same. I don't think it makes it worth more money to be LB. That's just my opinion. It's not so easy. Changing the zoning does not necessarily mean that people are going to come out of the woodwork. And I will add this, because there seems to be some consensus that people have come to us and talked to us. Not one person has actually talked to me about an idea going forward that's on the table. There was some talk about Irish pub, but the Irish pub is going right here in the alley from what I understand. So, and I quite frankly thought that was a little far-fetched. LP's LP, it is that. And Dr. Napier brings it up to go back residential. It can go back residential either way, but somebody's going to have to be willing to buy the properties and change them to residential. As it is now, there's only one house actually being lived in that's not an office. The rest have been converted to offices, and that's fine. That's what LP was really kind of designed to do. But it is what it is, and it's going to be hard for it to go back. We're not going to change it, at least in my opinion. I don't want to change it back to residential because that's not being fair to the people who have the LP version of it all now, and it is commercial. So I personally think that residential would be the best bet all the way along. Some mixed use would be best, where it's a combination of the two. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. It's going to have to take developers who are willing to take the risk and spend the money to do all of that.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Giordano. Okay, any other comments from the audience? Rock, I know you've already spoken on that. So.
I have a question. Point of information.
Yes, sir.
The property.
Step up here, Rocky. And it's uncommon to have somebody speak twice on the same issue.
This is a point of information. I'm not going to speak.
Okay.
Point of information.
Okay.
The properties that are located on either side of Waterloo, which properties, how many properties of the, 13?
There's 13.
13.
How many of them are quote unquote not in use at this particular point in time and are non-saleable? 3?
Yeah, I think there's 2. There's one office that's vacant, and there's a, well, if you count Dr. Eubanks. Dr. Eubanks is vacant. He's moved over to the south side. That's for sale. That whole building's for sale for $500,000.
But it's saleable. It's usable.
It's usable. It's
like 2 or 3 properties that are in dire need of help.
the house that's vacant.
All right. Thank you, Rocky.
And for the sake of the story, 5 of the properties are office, like Dr. Eubanks' building. They're absolutely offices. The Lominick's Pharmacy is actually a retail store, and then the bottom corner down on Hain Avenue is a parking lot for Shell House Funeral Home. So out of 13, 7 are actual commercial in the sense of something outside of LP, maybe even a little bit. You've got the houses that have been converted up at the top that are offices. On the left-hand side, there are 2 houses on the other side if you count the vacant one.
Are there any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Gay Smith, and I live at 1311 Hain Avenue in Aiken. Lived there most of my life. I'd like to ask the members of our city council how they would feel if a Dollar General were to be put in on Waterloo Street. Dollar Generals are popping up everywhere. I don't feel that that would be appropriate, but that is or would be allowed under the general business or the limited business.
Ma'am.
It would be considered a quick shop, would it not?
No, ma'am. It wouldn't be allowed there.
Why not?
That's a Ryan question, but we had some changes made to LB. Once upon a time, convenience store, or there were some different uses.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
At one time, that was in the LB, and then there were some changes made, exceptions. Ryan, Ryan is our planning executive. He'll come up and explain whether you can or you can't.
But while he's coming up, Ms. Smith, I would not like, nor would I do anything to allow a Dollar General to go on Waterloo, to answer your question. But Ryan, go.
Right, so it would actually fall into that other retail use, so that type of store would. It's not necessarily a convenience store, you call it a discount store, I suppose. So it kind of depends on how it fall in. In all practicality, the limit on size wouldn't allow a Dollar General. They're generally 9,000 to 10,000 square feet. The cap on square footage in the limited professional and limited business is 5,000 or 20% of the lot size, whichever is less. So just by kind of the nature of other things in the zone district, it tries to exclude those sorts of businesses.
But let's say there is size availability. Can a Dollar General come in, yes or no?
It would have to go through a special exception process.
Which is have to be voted on.
Which would, yeah, have to be voted on. So special exception is a hearing before the Board of Zoning Appeals that's noticed, in which case you have to prove that you are compatible with the property, compatible with the surrounding area, compatible with the comprehensive plan, and do not otherwise negatively impact the neighborhood in which it's in, or at least negative impacts are sufficiently mitigated.
And that does not come back to council?
Correct. That goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, the board appointed by council.
There are two pieces of property on Waterloo Street that have been bought by the same people. Would that not allow them to have enough land to put a Dollar General there?
Again, Mr. Mayor, from anything that I have been involved with, the Dollar General is at least 10,000 square feet and would not be permitted in that zone district, or at least 9,000 square feet, sorry.
And that'd be a special exemption too, of two adjoining
The
lots.
use itself would have to go through a special exception. So if that type of store were able to fit into a footprint that's 20% of lot size or 5,000 square feet, whichever is less, it would go through a special exception process as to whether it would be appropriate for that particular property.
Thank you, Ryan.
So what kind of businesses are you expecting to go in there?
Ms. Smith, I'm sorry. Ms.
Ask
yeah.
What kind of businesses are you
Yes, ma'am.
expecting? Because they're in this handout.
Yes, ma'am.
We're available on the table outside.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Copy, print shop, furniture store, grocery. You're going to have a grocery store that's going to be smaller than a Dollar General?
Yes, ma'am. That's why it says it's very limiting because of the size also. I mean, you're not going to see a
I've seen a
particular...
grocery store that is smaller than a...
It would be more of a, I mean, if anything did go there, which I don't think it necessarily would, but I think it would be more of a small market as opposed to, because it wouldn't be a grocery store, you're right.
Which would be like a quick shop?
It would be like a market, so you could walk in like what was downtown at one point, but we didn't have enough residency around to sustain it. But I mean, if that would be something that go in, it would be something that would be a market driven by what the community would support, so.
I would like to also let you know that when we were having these planning commission meetings, that I tried to make some comments there, and twice, at least, I was cut off by your chairman there. He would not let me make my comments. In fact, Mr. Hunter made the comment that this is the way it's going to be, and you can like it or leave it.
Ms. Smith,
Thank you.
did we answer your questions on that?
Yeah, and just to mention of grocery stores, having dealt with grocery stores, they generally, the bylaws of the world want to be much bigger than what could be sustained there. And I don't think we can have convenience stores. We scratched that, right?
That is correct. That was amended to prohibit convenience stores in LB when council passed the amending ordinance November 12th.
Right. So the restrictions would be so big on grocery stores, they'd have to have some little market type shop.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Councilman Valders.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
I'm Jane Valders. I live at 707 Hayne. Why do we have a map like this? Has that already been discussed? Because the whole discussion for the last 4 months has been the difference between limited professional and limited business. And you look at this map, and all of it's commercial, but it's not. We've always distinguished in Aiken, since I've been here, between professional and commercial use. And the planning department came up with this map?
And I'm not quite sure, when did that map first surface? Was that?
Today.
Today. I didn't see it until today either.
Well, for example, on Waterloo Street, on the right side, in the middle of the right side, there's that's a purple. This says it's residential, right? We moved here in '74. That building has never been residential. It was Dr. Leip's office for years and years and years, and it has never had a residential use. I'm sorry, I just can't, I was going to be quiet, but I can't sit here and look at wrong information being presented as the basis for a decision, and I just thought you should know that.
Well, there's actually a house between what you and I would remember as Dr. Tucker and Dr. Boykins, which is the second one up. And then there is a house in between another doctor's office.
Yes.
Which is shown
Between
green.
Dr. Borp's old office.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Right.
But that property has never been residential. I mean.
Well, it looks like a house now. I don't remember.
Why don't we have an accurate map? I don't understand this, and I don't understand not distinguishing between professional and commercial. We've always done it. I mean, ever since I've lived here, council has, and I just don't understand why this isn't accurate.
And I would hope for second reading we'll have a map that does distinguish that, Jane.
Or at least distinguish between what the zoning is, because some
Yeah,
of the
I
pink
would
ones
rather see
are
it by zoning.
LP, and some of them are houses, and some of them are GB.
No.
It's hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Do you remember what year zoning?
It came in the early 70s, because we moved here in '74, and it had just come in for a couple of years at that point in time.
But all these buildings existed before this.
And the zoning, I think, quite rationally reflected what was there.
Right.
And so people bought property, and they were willing to accept what was there as a neighbor, and it's when they change it that they start worrying.
Right.
And when you've got a lot of these uses, like restaurants and grocery stores that are conditional uses. Now, restaurants are conditional uses. They don't have a hearing before anybody. They just go to Ryan and the planning department.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that people worry about at night. So, you know what I'm saying? So when we're having this discussion, you've got to have accurate information about what, I don't expect you all to know what everything on every block is used for. I certainly don't. But for goodness sakes, our planning office ought to know, and especially if they're going to have the right in the future of their own volition to decide whether a use is allowed or not. It doesn't give you a lot of faith when you look at this map, frankly.
Yeah, I think, from the standpoint of zoning, it's zoned one thing, then the county has it assessed, and they've designated the 2 residential properties on Waterloo, because I looked at this a lot today.
Well,
they have them as residential, not commercial. And that may be part of the mix-up, because you've still got GB in there, you've got LP, you got residential in a LP. It gets kind of confusing.
And if a property owner wanted to say, this is not a commercial property, I want it to be, because their taxes are lower. Yeah,
it's funny, they're all paying 6%.
But this is city zoning, and if our city planning department can't show us a map with accurate indication of what uses are, then I guess I'll continue to bother you, because it just bothers me terribly that we can't look at this and know that it's accurate.
And I do think this particular map was in response to a question of, is it residential or non-residential use, not zoning, but that's a good point.
Sure. It got done today.
Thank you.
Better information than this.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah.
Clarification.
Yeah.
Isn't this a terminology thing? I mean, this is a land use map. And land use categories are not the same as the zoning categories.
That is correct.
That is correct. It's different term, that is correct.
All right, very good, very good. Anyone have anything to add that hasn't been voiced at this point? Yes, sir. I've recognized someone on the floor, Rocky. Yes, sir. Good evening.
My name is Don Blunt. I live at 1023 Hayne Avenue, which is the residential one that's kind of larger than the others there on Hayne Avenue. I can't get into the details that you guys have been getting into about what's zoned and this and that and so forth, but it seems to me that there's a large general question about Waterloo being not as attractive as it could be. And so the way we'll make it get more attractive is we'll encourage people to bring businesses in there. And I don't think that would be all that attractive. It would be convenient. I could walk from my house to, I don't know, buy a popsicle or something. I don't know. And so I think that the point that was made earlier by Rachel, that we could slow this thing down a little bit. I mean, here we are discussing this with inadequate information, and most of us live our lives not paying all that much attention to zoning. I'm impressed with how much you guys know about it, but still, you are contemplating making a very large change to our neighborhood. And when we went to this kind of like thing back in, I don't know, July or something, where we had other maps and other colors, I don't think it was presented to us from the very beginning that one of the options would be leave things alone, let things kind of generally, slowly evolve, rather than saying we're going to come up with some sort of wonderful plan that's going to solve this and that problem, while, of course, creating other problems that cannot be anticipated. So I'd just like to speak, as I held my hand up a minute ago, in opposition to this change and in support of what Rachel said and what all the other people so far have said. And I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt. Rocky.
Just a moment ago, it was stated that we would have a better map at the second reading. Has a decision already been made that this is going to be passed on to a second reading?
Yeah, if it goes to a second reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, comments from council?
I have a question regarding the number of meetings we've had in the last 6 months. How many meetings, Ryan, have we had in the last 6 months to discuss this with the community?
I think between the neighborhood meeting, the work sessions, the city council referral, the planning commission public hearing, the planning commission action to put it on the agenda, and then the planning commission referral itself, I think I counted 11 meetings.
11 meetings?
Yeah, since roughly April, March.
And this is the first time that we've shown this map to...
I was responding to a question about the differentiation between just using tax assessor data.
Okay.
What was residentially taxed, what was non-residentially taxed, and then these are the blunt categories the county uses. So staff responded to an inquiry, created that map. And I'm not trying to represent all commercial in all ways. We're talking land use in a broad sense. And I just responded to the question by the way the map was created. So.
Okay. Tell, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. I can tell by the look.
I appreciate you responding to an inquiry here, Ryan, but to the community, this is not representative of the 11 meetings and everything else that we've heard in discussions. So I struggle with this as well. And I understand the county has it summed up that way, and it's a land use map and all that. But it just sets a point of confusion across the board, and I think that was very clear today, because even I was confused up here.
Right, so that was last information. We did include the
Yes.
zoning map in the packet and in the materials that was sent to use the planning commission. This has been the map we've used all along for that as throughout which specific properties would be changing, or will be supposed to be changed.
So this is the map the community has.
This is the map we've been working.
This is
That's correct. This is just the current zone map. Limited professionals in the light blue, dark blue is office. The pink you see there is general business, or dark or red, I guess. And then the yellow are residentially zoned.
This map, have they seen this
Right.
map?
That's essentially, yeah, just a different version of this map. We had blown that up for the purpose of putting it up here, but that is the same map.
And, you know, what throws me off a little bit is the fact that I don't recall who mentioned there's 5 offices, however many residences. I mean, the current state of Waterloo right now, I'm just not grasping.
So the map that we showed up there is, if you were to take that map, the previous map.
Which one? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps.
This map, Waterloo Street, that's directly south from the right down the middle there. This is the most recent zoning now. Those are all along Waterloo Street because of the zoning, all limited professionalism and small office uses, with the exception of on the northeast corner there, or southeast of Waterloo and Richland. That is a pharmacy, which is not permitted in the LP district. And then on the northwest corner of Hain and Waterloo, that property is a parking lot related to the funeral home. And that is also wouldn't be allowed under the LP district. The remaining along there, you have 2 residential properties, or at least most recently used as residential. One is vacant. The rest of them have most recently been used, even vacant, as small offices.
So, and I see what they're zoned. What makes them up right now? I mean, currently right now, who's living there? Who's running a business there? What are the numbers for that exactly?
It is 11 to 13 business or type of business to 2 residentials, one of them being vacant.
Right, and so other than that, you have, I believe, 2 law offices. You have an insurance office that is also mixed use, also residence.
So 11 are running businesses right now?
Correct.
And 2 are families living there?
Well, I don't know. Hugh is single and spends time in Florida back and forth.
Well, I mean,
So-
yeah, like
and
physical living.
he uses this as his living. He lives there when he's in Aiken, and then nobody's living in the other one.
Okay. Thank you.
Ryan, was the map you done the one that I asked you to do?
So yeah, that's the other. I mean, that's essentially the same map. If we cross-reference them, I think there's 4 parcels that are different between that map, which is a map that we did with staff reconnaissance, and then this map. It's essentially the same, almost the exact same map.
I wanted the sense of the commercial and the residential.
Right.
Because I was concerned about the protection of residential lots.
Right. So I say in one sense we wanted to point out which ones were existing residential properties per your request.
Given what we've heard tonight, I don't think one map can satisfy everybody. I think we need a map that's going to show the zoning, the current zoning, which is in our packet.
Right.
And it clearly shows that of the 13 properties, there are, on Waterloo, there are 2 general business, and the rest are currently zoned limited professional. But then, going back to Councilwoman Gregory's question about the use, that makes a difference as well, and there probably ought to be a map that shows the use, which you know very clearly, but I certainly don't.
So yeah, we don't carry a database of the specific use on each property. It's a small enough area we can go, recon.
I mean,
it's specific businesses and specific residents and vacancy and non-vacancy, at least to the best of our ability. To essentially just take kind of a walking, which is how that original map got created. But it was just a broad brush through.
Well, it's frustrating to the folks that are here tonight, obviously, because they want to speak to the issue, but when there's confusion about the facts, and that should not be the case.
So for clarification, for use, what we're addressing is because something is zoned as LP, someone may be living in it. And so it's still zoned that. There are properties that my family own. It's zoned one thing, but we have a child that may be living there. It doesn't impact the zoning of that property.
So yeah, correctly, there's land use, which is residential, office, and you can go into small office, medium office, large office, small retail, those sorts of things. The zoning is a package of those things along with other ordinances that group them together for the purpose of organizing use.
Okay. So what this map I'm hearing is showing us that even though somebody's living there, it could be used professionally or something else.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Now, the question is, how many of these properties on Waterloo are conforming to the LP? Are they all conforming properties for LP or not?
In all aspects, parking, all of that, probably 3.
So only 3 are conforming properties.
Right, because you have to have parking in the side and rear. That's usually kind of what they have to be of residential character. They have to have parking in the side and rear. Are kind of the 2 characteristics of a LP property, either one, and so you only have about 2 of those.
So if someone comes in and wants to rehabilitate, do they have to bring it up to current standards?
If it's 50% of the appraised value or greater investment being put into a property, then it has to be brought up to current standards.
So that's going to be a problem for anybody who wants to buy it and do that.
It'll be a very big challenge for anybody who wants to do that.
Wants to do what?
It's a significant investment.
Wants to do what? I'm sorry.
If somebody were to need to make a sufficient change where they would put 50% of value into a property, so if you were to have to do a significant rehab to move a new business in, it would have to be brought up to current standards with landscaping, parking, potentially the design standards would have to be a residential appearance. In other words, if you're going to do 50% or greater value renovation to a property along Waterloo Street, it would take a significant investment to bring it up to the current zoning ordinance.
But now, given that I'm not a developer and I'm not a builder, could somebody come in there with one of these properties and make it to a business without spending 50%?
Yeah, without, the vacant one, I don't know how much work needs to be done there. But yes, if Hugh Eford decided that he wanted to convert it to an office, it wouldn't take a whole lot. You might want to do a little bit more, but no, you could go that. Now, I think LB is pretty much the same thing, isn't it? It's the same process.
So I mean, it's we only have 3 properties on there that conform to the zoning use right now.
That's right.
Use-wise, you have several that conform, but they predate the existing ordinance, so they're legal non-conforming in some way or another.
Right.
And just to clarify for me, on Fallberg and Trafalgar, currently, how many back up to Waterloo that are being lived in?
I believe 3 or 4 on either side, 3 or 4.
Total or on either?
Total between the 2 streets.
Yeah, there's only, Shell House is down there on the corner, so you've got 4 that would meet that standard. as I remember, I don't know that by heart. I'd have to go by and look at them, but you would be surprised how many houses in the downtown area, east side, west side, are zoned a commercial zoning, either GB or LP, and they're houses and they're being lived in.
That happens.
And they always have been since, like Councilwoman Waters brought up. They've been there. They were zoned that since 1972 or 3 or whatever. It just, some of the things don't make a whole lot of sense in terms of the zoning.
There's been no property zoning change, even though someone is using it as a residence.
That's right.
Correct.
Question, Ryan, there's a provision in the LB zoning for dine-in or carry-out / delivery eating establishments with limited hours of operation, no drive-through, no outdoor entertainment or speaker system, and no internally illuminated signage. Outdoor entertainment, does that include outdoor dining?
No, outdoor dining would be different than outdoor entertainment.
So outdoor dining would be permitted?
Correct.
Okay, that's a major concern I have, obviously, for outdoor dining in a business that backs up to a residence. That's a major quality issue. How would we address that?
Buster?
It's in that same section. If you were to do a text amendment, that would be the way to address it, is that basically essentially that same, which is a design standard for eating establishments within this district, is a conditional use of the table. It would be a provision that would need to be added, a clause essentially to that section of the ordinance.
Yeah, because that's what I asked last week, and the answer last week was this ordinance applies to the whole city.
It does.
So
it does, but there are no other LB. There's only 2 other LB zone properties, and that particular, there are no outdoor eating at either of those 2 properties.
to satisfy that concern for me, we would need to change that text.
Correct. And for that specific case, the most appropriate thing would be to change the text.
Okay. I guess I have one final comment, if I may.
All right, Mr. Dewar?
Well, have we finished with public comment? I mean, is it back to us? Or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then,
You want?
yeah, I think at this point, we have a lot of questions. And we have a lot of misunderstanding what this LB is, that it needs to be explained a little better. I think that the citizens are owed a better map, one that they understand.
Or 2.
Well, hopefully 1. We can get to 1 map.
One
map we all agree on. And I think we need to do that. And I would suggest that we table this, come back and review it after we have another map.
I'd like to say something.
Well, I'm sorry, but there's the motion on the floor.
It wasn't a motion,
He made a motion, somebody made a motion, second. You second the motion?
No, he that is.
Just a point of order, I thought you said you would like to table it, but that's, to my mind, not a motion. I mean.
Go ahead and say what you want.
But I'd like to also say, and give me 1 second to make sure we do that, is what I want to see for the next meeting. I think we need to spell it out.
Do that after they withdraw their motion.
Yeah,
Councilman Dewar?
My comment is I just want to focus on something that Rachel said that I think is extremely important. We're talking about zoning in a neighborhood that's going to could be severely affected with whatever happens with a county government center, and I think it's quite frankly premature. There's one extreme that I'm hearing about the county government center. It's going to be a bunch of Section 8 housing, and the other extreme is it's going to be more upscale. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. The property hasn't been sold. There's been 2 offers on it. I am hearing that it wouldn't close until at least the May-June timeframe because one of the developers needs that time to be eligible for the credit. So I'm not sure we need to be in a rush to do this zoning at this point until we have a better sense of what's going to happen with that government building. I mean, that's my view. I think that's a very important consideration because whatever goes in there the businesses that support that, just as happened with the hospital and just as happened with the government center, are going to go in Waterloo. And it will make a big difference whether they're Section 8 housing or more upscale housing.
That's where if we had a good land plan, we'd have some control over that.
Well, strategy we talked about earlier.
Right.
And
there's nothing from the people I've talked to that it'll be anything close to Section 8. Now, that being said, I move that we table this until we get some more information.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor of tabling this? And that's unanimous.
Can I mention?
Give credit to you for your...
Yeah. The moment this became ambiguous, obviously led to this. And so with that said, I think it's important that we get the map, which we have in our packet, of the current zoning, the current usage, and a look as to how we want to zone it, which we have in our packet, but maybe even a little bit more behind it. What are we thinking this is going to project into? And to your point in our discussion earlier, I think, you know, what are the true uses that we see in the future as a city, as a community? We need to make it a little bit more visionary, and right now we don't have that. So I'd like to see that.
Agree. Agree.
Mr. Chairman, may I have make a quick comment, please?
Sure.
We hear a lot about Section 8 housing. And Section 8 housing, for those of you who hear this from folks, that is only a fear tactic, okay? That is a fear tactic to you. You have a body that will listen to you, that will do the right thing. Anytime someone throws up in your face is Section 8, they're trying to get you riled up. We don't even know what the property the county owned will be. And until you know that, then you make judgment. And you have, if you don't approve it, then there's an opportunity to come to county council to address that change that you're not comfortable with. But to dismiss people is what I see when you say Section 8. Some of your family members may need Section 8 one day. And I hear that a lot in our community, and this is not what Aiken is about. We're about doing the right thing for people. We're all humans. This is a good town with good people that use, I believe, good judgment, and I trust the people that lead in this town. Thank you very much for listening.
And I agree completely with that. It's false evidence appearing real. It's not what it is.
Right. I was the person that brought the Section 8 housing up. I tried to qualify it by saying that the businesses that would support a Section 8 housing would be different than those that would support a more upscale housing.
It is a scare tactic. I stand by that statement.
And I agree with it.
All right, we're going to move on down to new business 2. Before we do, for those who came to speak on item 1, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your comments. And I appreciate you being with us tonight. And I have a feeling there's fixing to be an exodus, isn't there? So. Moving down to new business, item number 2. This is first reading of an ordinance to sell property on Sumpter Street to Concierge Real Estate Service, LLC. By title, an ordinance approving the sale of 2 lots on Summer Street Northeast to Concierge Real Estate Services, LLC. Is there a motion? Councilman Price, second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gerardo. This way, seconds to her.
Hey, glad to use your name.
Any comment?
Yeah, there it is. Let's wait till he can hear him.
Any comments?
Yeah, comment. Comments from staff.
Okay. Yes, we do have an offer to purchase the 2 lots on Sumpter Street Northeast, 513 and 544, $3,000 for the 2 properties for potential single-family home development, and that is for council consideration at first reading.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I think it should be noted that the broker in charge is listed as the buyer on this property that she's purchasing.
That is correct.
So noted. Any other comments? All those in favor? Raise your hand, and that's unanimous. Item number 3 under new business. This is a first reading of an ordinance to sell property in Governor Aiken Park to Tom and Christian Shearer. By title, an ordinance approving the sale of 3 lots in Governor Aiken Park to Tom and Christian Shearer. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilman Girardeau. Is there a second?
Second, Smith.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Comments from staff?
Yes, we do. The individuals have offered to purchase the properties in Governor Aiken Park for the 3 properties maintained as community gardens, as 2 of the properties have been maintained in the past, and that is up for council consideration at first reading, is to sell these lots at Governor Aiken Park for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Beedenbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
It's a great idea.
All right, so noted. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you.
And I guess what Councilman DeWar and Councilwoman Gregory were absent from this vote, and I believe Councilwoman Gregory was absent on the Sumpter Street vote.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Number 4, first reading of an ordinance to annex 105 Marvin Drive and zone it residential, single-family RS10.
Yes, as we've, our water and sewer policy.
Is there a motion?
Nope.
Yeah, so moved.
Councilman Girardeau, Councilman Waltz, comments from staff.
Thank you. Sorry about that. As the water and sewer annexation policy requires, this properties before you for annexation 105 Marvin Drive and zone it RS10.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the audience? Okay, comments from council? All those in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Ms. Gregory.
And noted that Councilman DeWar has returned to vote on that.
I counted to 4 before I left.
Item number 5 under new business is a first reading of an ordinance to rezone property at 1706 University Parkway from planned commercial to general business. By title, an ordinance amending the zoning of real estate located at 1706 University Parkway from planned commercial to general business. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councilman DeWar. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Girardeau, comments from staff?
Yes, Security Federal Bank, the owner and applicant, has requested the rezoning of parcel at 1706 University Parkway from planned commercial to general business. And the property was before the Planning Commission at their November 13th meeting, and they unanimously recommended approval of the request to rezone from planned commercial to general business, and that's for council consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Beedenbaugh, any comments from the audience? Okay, comments from council?
Have they submitted any plans of what they plan on doing?
I am not aware that they have submitted any plans for what the potential use is, no.
But Security Federal owns it.
That's correct.
But I wonder what they're going to do.
I would guess.
Correct, there are no plans, or they felt it to be more marketable than having a very specific plan on site that had a small office in the back corner, essentially is what the approved plan is for it, and to be able to better market the property, they just wanted a more flexible zone district.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is contiguous with GB?
It's county, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's already in the city. This one was already annexed, so, but there were 2 other properties that were zoned GB, just a few hundred yards away at a previous, maybe your last meeting.
That's right, several meetings ago at Grand Oaks.
Yeah, the entrance to Grand Oaks, that's right.
All right. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down the agenda to new business number 6. This is a first reading of an ordinance to rezone property known as South Park Commons from limited professional LP to residential single-family RS6. By title, an ordinance amending the zoning of 12 properties located in South Park Commons from limited professional to residential single-family RS6. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Girardeau. Councilman Dewar. Comments from staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. South Park Commons subdivision located off of Colony Parkway is 12 lots and was zoned limited professional, and they are built out to 12 single-family residential properties with rear alley garage access, and they have requested rezoning from limited professional to residential single-family RS6, and the Planning Commission considered the request for rezoning and unanimously recommended the application for a rezoning from limited professional LP to residential single-family RS6.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beedenbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council?
This is off of Whiskey Road.
That's correct. It's off of Colony Parkway, off of Whiskey, behind the Clarion, across from our city attorney's office, right before you get to Colony Apartments. There's
Past the hotel.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, cool, great.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand.
Probably in your district.
No, it's not. I didn't say it.
It's unanimous, thank you. Moving down to item number 7, this is a first reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance regarding small cell wireless and amateur radio. By title, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance regarding small cell wireless and amateur radio. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilman Waltz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Dewar. Comments from staff?
Yes. At the request of the planning director, the planning commission reviewed changes to the zoning ordinance regarding small cell wireless and amateur radio. And regarding small cell wireless, our zoning ordinance describes the standards for specific use for telecommunications facilities. It was when that ordinance was written, that was when they were primarily large cell towers or larger facilities. But as technology is evolved to so-called small cell technology or small wireless facilities, we felt like we needed to amend the zoning ordinance to permit these installations by right through an administrative approval pursuant to design and locational standards with the following considerations. And I will read these into the record: that any installation shall be consistent in general size, massing, and scale to others nearby within 200 feet of the proposed installation, that the installation should only be on a new pole where co-location on an existing structure is not feasible, and that any installation shall not interfere with public safety equipment. The proposed new section adds definitions to the code for small cell technologies to ensure current processes for other telecommunication facilities. And regarding amateur radio, the current zoning ordinance does not differentiate between commercial and amateur telecommunications, and FCC regulations regarding these installations are regulated to a lesser extent. And planning staff did conduct substantial research and recommended to the Planning Commission amendments to provide a clear distinction between these use types to create a regulatory framework specifically for the treatment of amateur radio installations. So any amateur radio installation under a total height of 75 feet for commercial above grade and meeting other stated conditions will not be subject to special exception or technical review. And those that do not meet height requirement and number conditions will be subject to the special exception and technical review process in the proposed amendment. And this will bring our regulations into compliance with FCC regulations. And another proposed change to the zoning ordinance regarding amateur radio is that submissions for review will be directed to the planning director. And at the November 13th meeting, the Planning Commission reviewed the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding these changes and recommended these amendments for approval. I do want to state that today I received phone calls from SCE&G, Mr. Scott Neely, who could not be here tonight, and also from AT&T's representative, Mr. Ted Creech, who is here. I know Mr. Creech worked with the Municipal Association on the drafting of the model ordinance for this, which ours used as a template. We made some modifications to, but I know SCE&G, whose poles a lot of this technology will go on, they are federally required to allow their use, but they are. He was just made aware of this. Their staff at SCANA is reviewing this statewide, and between now and second reading, we could have some minor wording changes based on input from SCANA or SCE&G and perhaps AT&T as well. So we have before you this first reading of the ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance relating to small cell wireless and amateur radio communication.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beedenbaugh. That was a lot. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council.
Ryan, these pictures you put up, that's the antenna on the light poles?
That is correct. Essentially, that picture on your right, on the left below, but the right, you'll see some of those around town now. They're essentially, they look like a commercial little office trash can turned upside down and made to match the pole. Then what we've run into with the zoning ordinance, we've had several of these go through the BZA because we have nothing essentially between like an antenna on your house and a full-blown 200-foot cell tower.
Yeah.
Cellular companies, telecommunications companies are moving more towards these small cell installations that, to fill in their grid, essentially, they'll either backhaul through fiber typically to a larger tower, so, or some of them will use line of sight to get back to a larger tower to move the signal. But essentially we had no in-between in the ordinance, so each one of these would have to go through a special exception request when they would be essentially a fairly small modification to an existing either utility pole or something similar. And so there were enough, there were a few BZA special exceptions issued already, so we took direction from the BZA to try to draft an ordinance that may accommodate these. We used the municipal association's ordinance the model ordinance that they had put together and kind of intertwined it in our existing ordinance instead of completely kind of dropping it in wholesale. We formatted it to fit our ordinance essentially that we already had, the structure and framework.
All right.
These things have come a long way.
They have to help fill in commercial areas that are fairly dense and you might have reception issues, and you can build these. They don't have a very wide range, but they do help densify the network. It's getting more and more necessary.
They were a lot smaller and less discreet 13 years ago in California.
Right.
It just takes a while to get across the country.
All right, any other comments from council? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ted Creech, External Affairs Director for AT&T in South Carolina. Thank you for your consideration of this, and thank you for your proactivity in terms of working to establish an ordinance that allows for small cells. Just to follow up on Ryan's comments, small cells, and they come in different forms and shapes and designs than just that. They can blend in very well with surroundings and with the community. And as Ryan said, the small cells, they might broadcast a signal for use by customers, maybe 1,000, 1,200 feet or so. But what our engineers tell us is that in certain specific areas, we need to not so much spread our wireless signal farther out, but to add capacity to spots where the signal already is. So if you have more and more and more people using their smartphones to, for example, watch their football game on their smartphone, downloading or streaming video, for example, that takes up a lot of capacity in the wireless network. And so we need help in those specific areas to meet the demand of those specific targeted areas. But when we do that with a small cell, we also help the large macro tall cell tower continue providing good service for folks even a mile around. If you don't have a small cell where you need it, then technical resources are going to be sucked from the tall tower to that spot, and that can diminish over time the effectiveness of the cell signal for a larger community. So not only needed for small specific areas, but also needed for the existing macro cell towers to continue functioning well. So thank you very much for your interest.
So it's not a matter of replacing the big towers. This is just an enhancement to it.
That's correct. It's just adding to what, in fact, it would over time enable a community to reduce continued need for additional tall towers if you put more small cells in.
That makes sense. We need them at the stadiums.
I'm sorry. Do you disguise these somehow on top if you need to? Color them a dark color or something to blend them out?
There are different colors that can be utilized and some different designs that can be utilized as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, so that you didn't look at these two pictures and say, that's all the industry can do. That's not all the industry can do. We can do different kinds of designs. We might decide to utilize an existing, say, wooden pole and put, a cylindrical antenna at the top of that wooden pole instead of replacing the wooden pole or doing something special to it. But in special designed areas or regions, there are possibilities.
How do those get chosen?
That's where we would work with the planning department.
Okay.
On those kinds of, and particularly in those districts that would call for some type of historic or other type of treatment. So,
okay,
it's fascinating.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Any other comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor of first reading, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number 8 under new business, this is an acceptance of Brownfields Assessment Grant and first reading of an ordinance to amend the FY 2018-19 budget to include the Brownsfield grant by title, an ordinance amending the budget of the City of Aiken for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. We approve this Brownsville grant and adjust our budget accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Thank you, Councilman DeWar. Comments from staff?
Yes, we were informed of the award back in the spring, and it does require, since the period of the grant runs from October 18 through September 21, we do want to begin allocating the money as through a budget adjustment, as is before you tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, can you refresh my memory where we're going to use this money?
It's in the downtown, in our general downtown area. We would use this money for assessments. You did approve the contract with the consultant to do this work for us, and then hopefully by identifying it, we can leverage this and ultimately get money for the cleanups.
Okay.
Provided owners would be okay with that.
It's typically a two-step program with the grants, one for the evaluation and then one for the cleanup.
Correct.
So the Jackson property would be?
Potentially, yes. Absolutely. It's within the grant, the scope of the grant.
All right. Comments from the audience? Any other comments, questions from council? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to new business item number 9, this is a first reading of an ordinance to amend the FY 2018-19 budget to receive revenue from winter storm packs and to allocate expenditures. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, thank you, Councilman Waltz. Is there a second? All right, Mr. Jared O. Comments from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did receive rather quickly after the General Assembly overrode their veto our final amount of ice storm money from the 2014 weather event for $242,000 and change. And we, again, need to do a budget amendment for this. We propose we allocate up to $51,600 for one-time employee compensation next month, and then the remaining amount be put into undesignated special holding, and that is in the form of proposed ordinance to council tonight.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council?
I'll go on record as saying I think the money should be used for yard debris pickup and try to make up on some of the problems there.
Any comments?
Money. I understand that, but we've got problems there. That's what this money was for.
All right. All those in favor of the ordinance, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Moving down to petitions and requests. Number 1, this is an approval of resolution to close ICMA plan by title resolution of the City of Aiken to terminate the City of Aiken SC money purchase plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, Smith.
Waltz, second. Councilwoman Price. Comments from staff?
Yes, this plan was set up back in March of 16. Council adopted by resolution this plan for providing the benefits to a former city manager pursuant to his employment contract, and we have attempted to close it, but since it was opened via resolution, it needs to be closed via resolution, we are told.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor of the resolution, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 2 under petitions and requests. This is a request for approval of a resolution to provide city water at 934 East Pine Log Road by title of resolution authorizing the provision of water utility service to property located at 934 East Pine Log Road. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilman Jarrett. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a resolution pursuant to our water and sewer plan policy, I should say, this before you. And the Planning Commission reviewed this policy, this request at their November 13th meeting. And unanimously recommended providing water to the proposed site, which will house a Dollar General at 934 East Pine Log Road with the following conditions that are listed in the cover memo. And that is before council tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Beanbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. I apologize.
For the applicant and happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay.
We're going to approve it unless you don't want it approved.
Love to have that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Any other comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council?
I've got one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Waltz.
I said it earlier, and I'll repeat myself here. I think when we get these things, we should put design standards on these when we request them, when they're requesting services from us. We don't have to accept these metal buildings. We certainly have the right to make our town look as good as we can. I think this one's out of the barn. We got to go with it, but from now on, I think we should consider that.
Good point.
Thanks for your comments, sir. And you're spot on. And we have submitted upgraded heightened signage requirements, architectural elevations, as required with working with Ryan and Mario staff to make sure we put a quality product out there. So we have done that and tried to adhere to some of the planned commercial zoning guidelines in y'all's ordinances, even though it's in a county district, to make sure it gets done properly.
I appreciate that. I
Yes,
think
sir.
it's something we need to start looking at for.
We agree. Thank you.
You can help to make this project a model one.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Okay, all those in favor? Raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Anything under issues and updates? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Councilman DeWar, second. Councilman Gregory. All right, all those in favor, please stand up. We're adjourned.